So we're here in the Accademia Gallery in Florence,
And it's actually really crowded in here. There's people everywhere seemingly trying to get to this centerpiece of the museum.
which is, of course, the highlight, the statue of David by Michelangelo. The formal unveiling of the statue was on September 8th in 1504.
But funny enough, most people don't know that the David was actually not started by Michelangelo. The marble itself was started by Agostino di Duccio in the year 1466, who was commissioned to make the marble into what was called the Gigante. Now, after asking Donatello to help him with the more technical difficulties he was having, Donatello
Politely refused to help by dying. So later, after Agostino gave up, about 10 years pass, and in 1477, Antonio Rosolino tries to finish the work too, but he too gave up.
So we have two people that have tried to work on this marble and have seemingly left it for nothing. Now in 1501, Michelangelo is commissioned to take this hopeless piece of marble and to create it.
Now understand that this piece of marble had been worked on and off for over 45 years.
Yes, so after 45 years of sitting and being worked on from time to time, Michelangelo has now been given 2 years to finish this piece, finish this David, and he is to be paid 6 large gold florins a month, which is equivalent to 144 in total.
But it didn't even take 5 months until the commissioners realized how great an artist Michelangelo was, and they bumped up his payment to 400 florins. So enough about the past. Let's talk about the actual artwork itself. So you look at David and you see the ideal man. He is perfect. He's very lifelike. He is sculpted into the form contrapposto, which is that very lifelike stance with all of his weight on one foot and his torso leaning, kind of hunched over. It's very lifelike.
Now, you mentioned that it is very lifelike and real, but many people would agree with that statement and many people would disagree. For one, the David is a little bit taller than our average man. The David is 17 feet tall. So first we have his height. Now, let's also mention his big hands and his big head. So which one of these do you want to explain first?
Let's start with the height, because that would be the easiest. So David is 17 feet tall, significantly larger than the average person.
Huge.
Yeah, and there's a reason behind this. David was built so big because he symbolized the liberty and freedom of the Republican ideals. During this time period, the Medici, a very powerful family, threatened these rights in the nation. And so the ideal behind David was he was their hero fighting against this giant that was dominating the nation.
And which makes sense in reference to the biblical story, because as we know, David did defeat the giant Goliath. So that makes perfect sense in two different references.
Now, as for the hands, the meaning of David, the etymological meaning, is strong hands. So to show this, Michelangelo made David's hands much larger in proportion to his body than normal. So he also exaggerated the tendons and the veins to make him look a lot more vascular and strong and show that he was a real man.
He's a manly man, you know.
Yeah. Now, for the head, there's a few reasons that played a part in why Michelangelo sculpted his head so large. First, David was originally meant to be seen from afar. He was supposed to be put high up on a cathedral, and so the head was made larger to compensate for the foreshortening that would come from seeing him from down below. But that's not the only reasons why his head was made big.
Yeah, and in addition, many people believe that the David statue was given an extra big head to show the importance of intellect. As we know from the story, the biblical story, we know that David outwitted the giant. The giant was much bigger than David, but David, using his intellect, was able to overcome the giant. So that's also been used as a good explanation of why David's head is a little off proportion. You know, it's not quite the right size. Now, speaking of heads, we have to touch on the subject that just seems to kind of shout out. It's almost at eye level, and it just kind of
I
begs the
know
question.
exactly what you're talking about. If David was sculpted to be the man of all men, if he wanted David to be perfect, I'm going to be honest, I feel like it could have been pretty easily done by simply matching the glove to fit the already large hands, if you know what I mean. But anyways, Michelangelo used different ways to emphasize David's manliness. He went beyond the classic examples, and he did this by rendering his pubic hair almost flame-like. If you'll pay attention to that, it looks like he's got flames coming out of his genitalia area.
So though Michelangelo is criticized for, a disproportionate head, disproportionate hands, not really making the ideally perfect man, it seems that Michelangelo had other ideas in mind. It seems that he was looking at two different aspects. First, as we know, the anatomical. Michelangelo is known as one of the best, sculptors of anatomy, and we can see that through the different musculature and the different ways in which he showed veins. And my favorite part is when here in the gallery, when the sun is setting, the shadow is just touching David, you can see the perfect embodiment of those muscles and how they're just perfectly sculpted. Now, aside from that, Michelangelo was also looking at the David from ideological standpoints, in that his hands were big, he was strong, he showed power. His head was big, he showed intellect, he showed he had a brain. So it seems that though people may criticize Michelangelo in some ways, and some people think it's perfect, Michelangelo was looking at the man from two different perspectives, and he created the perfect ideological man and the perfect anatomical man.